Susan Leith. I'm Bethlehem's town historian, and I'm standing right here at the Slingerland Burial Vault with the monument for John I. Slingerland. And I've been town historian for almost 13 years now here in Bethlehem, New York. And I've always known about the burial site and that it was here, but it was very much overgrown. It was full of trees, basically abandoned. There was a lot of kids getting inside the vault, and it was in very poor shape. And things came together about 2 years ago when I realized now is the time to get together a group that we call the Friends of the Slingerland Family Burial Vault. And the group got together to see what we could do to restore the vault and to restore this little historic site. I was able to get neighbors, literally 2 folks who live right next door to the burial site are on the committee. I was able to get descendants of the Slingerland family are on the committee, and had a wonderful moment in our very first meeting where 2 people who had never met, we sat down and they were doing their, how are you related to the Slingerlands? And they discovered that they both shared a grandfather, a great-grandfather, and they had never met each other before. And their grandfather happened to be John I. Slingerland. So that was just kind of a neat moment of community where people came together. I'm Susan Leith, Bethlehem's town historian, and my job is to kind of set the stage for you about the hamlet of Slingerlands and a little bit of the history to kind of get you ready for when you go off and meet some of the characters that you'll meet. John I. Slingerland and his mom and his brother and a couple others. So that's my job right now. Can you hear me okay in the back? Back there? Okay. So what I want you to do is, if you can imagine 350, 400 years ago, what this area might have been like. It's hard. It would have been wilderness, trees, some open space. There were the Native Americans were here, the Mohican Indians particularly in this area. They would have had seasonal villages, they would have been around. Things really changed when the Europeans came along. You might have heard of Henry Hudson. He's pretty famous, you know, in 1609 when he came up the Hudson River. That was really the start of European settlement in our area. And also not too much later after that, along came the first Slingerland that we know of. And his name was Tunis Slingerland, and he shows up in those early records in 1654 is when he first turns up, and he is a trader at Beverwyck. So Beverwyck is where Albany is today, and that's what he was doing. It's about the time that he married Engelte Brott, and she was the daughter of Albert Brott, the Norwegian. And you might know the Normanskill Creek, which really is right up the road here. It's very close by. That was named after her father. So he was pretty connected locally. And then Tunis went out and negotiated with the Native Americans, both the Mohican and the Mohawk by this point, and was able to purchase 10,000 acres in the hamlet, not the hamlet, this was in the town of New Scotland, so not in Bethlehem, right next door. When the descendants get together of the Slingerland family for like the family reunions, they always talk about the 10,000 acres. It's definitely always capitalized and in bold print, the 10,000, you know, that was their acreage. Like I said, this was over in New Scotland. If you were to go out Route 32, you'll see some signs for some old Slingerland's homesteads. That's part of that early tract. He did have to work out, so that about 1680. So Tunis Slingerland, who was that very early 1600s guy, was out in New Scotland purchasing his, what ended up being 10,000 acres of land from the Mohican and the Mohawk Indians in the area. I've mentioned the Van Rensselaers on the manor, and in the 1650s, the Van Rensselaers were like, well, no, we've already purchased this land. This is already our land. And the Slingerlands were like, no, we already have. And they had to go to court to who owned that land. and they fell in favor of the Slingerlands, so that 10,000 acres was designated to be outside of the manor and not on the manor. But of course Bethlehem, where we are, is very firmly on the manor. So they had to sort that out with the very powerful Van Rensselaer family too, and it came out in their favor. However, where we are now, this was definitely on the manor of Rensselaer. So we're talking the late 1600s into the 1700s. And the Van Rensselaers, you might have heard of Killian Van Rensselaer, had a system where if you wanted to come and settle here, you rented land from him. And you'll hear Leah Slingerland talk about how her husband didn't like having to pay the rent to the patroon every year, the annual rent on his acreage that he had. Right here is where he had his acreage. So these were very scattered farmhouses along the Hudson River, along the Vlomenkill, along the Normanskill, very spread out kind of communities that were starting to come in. But you get more and more settlers as time goes on. More and more people want to move this area, particularly after the American Revolution. A lot of folks from New England were pushing west, and that whole westward expansion, you could go on about that. So we have more settlers coming in, and people come inland more along the roads, and then you start getting the crossroads develop into hamlets or villages. And particularly around here, they've started developing to support the agricultural or the farmsteads that are around it. So at the crossroads, you'd have like we had here, you would have the local church, you would have the one-room schoolhouse, probably a tavern or a hotel, the blacksmith shop, the wheelwright, all those things that would support the community around it. The post office, all of that would be in the village. So you start having that develop. So John A. Slingerland, you'll see his farmhouse was way down New Scotland Road that way. He had 3 sons, 2 of which you're going to see tonight, William H. and John I. He had another son, Albert, and Albert Slingerland's homestead is at the end of Bridge Street right here. It's a big old Greek Revival style homestead, and it's way over there. If you go way past John I's house is William Henry's farmstead, which is also a Greek Revival building. And these are all 1830s, 1840s type time frames, so very spread out. And then slowly, as you get more people, they start subdividing. And Albert I is kind of interesting because he owned the land literally right here. And all of the houses along New Scotland Road, from about the church up here, these Victorians, if you go into their deeds and do the research, you'll come back to Albert Slingerland and his wife Catherine, and they're right there in the deeds. So it always goes back to the Slingerlands, it seems like, in this part of the hamlet. So it's very much an active, hamlet, active village here. When the railroad came through in 1863, you get even more, you get this idea of it being a suburb. That you could come live out here in the country, hop on the train. The station is about where the firehouse was now. Hop on the train, take the train into Albany, for work or for whatever. So it has this idea is coming into play of suburbia. And of course that really takes off, in the early 1900s, and then the automobile comes in and you have automobile suburbs. So that's kind of the trajectory of the hamlet, and really kind of almost all of Bethlehem, where basically it was a lot of farms, and then we got suburban development with a little bit of industrial kind of things here and there. So that's a little bit about the hamlet and how it developed. And the Victorians, you see, they kind of fill in between the older houses and the older farmstead. So the big Victorian houses are from the 1880s, 1890s. That's when those kind of houses started coming in to kind of fill in between. So this little hamlet, it was known as Normanskill for a long time. Like I said, the Normanskill Creek was right up here. And then I think it was about the time William H. became the postmaster, became known as Slingerlands or Slingerland's Corners. If you saw the map in the picnic pavilion, it's from 1866. That one says Slingerland's Corners right on there. So they're a very prominent family, and the hamlet became known for them. There was a hot minute in 1891 when this area was known as Ruxton, because the railroad decided for whatever reason that they wanted to change the name of the station and change it to Ruxton. And it lasted about 2 weeks before the Slingerlands, not negotiated. I think they just straightened out the railroad and said, no, this is Slingerland. So there's a poem that they published in the Altamont Enterprise, and the guy writes about how he went to bed in one evening in Slingerlands and he woke up the next morning and he lived in Ruxton. 10 days later he did the reverse. So for a very short time it was known as Ruxton here. And then I'll end with this quote. It's from 1866. It's from a history of Albany County, and it kind of sums up kind of the hamlet community kind of life that was going on right here. And it says, the village, so be Slingerlands, the village contains 44 dwellings, 50 families, 230 inhabitants, a commodious brick schoolhouse and M.E. church, printing establishment, hotel, marble and monumental works, a store, 2 blacksmith shops, a wheelwright and paint shop, a shoe shop, a cigar manufactory, the railroad station, and several fine residences. The village is pleasantly situated 7 miles from Albany. Being near the city, it affords many conveniences to those who seek for rural pleasure and the quiet of home life. And then it ends with, a physician and lawyer represent the professions. So that's kind of the little hamlet of Slingerlands. Any questions? Thoughts before you go walking off with your tour guide? John, who's also my husband, I'll be bringing up the rear. And yeah, if you have no questions, we'll get rolling.
My name's Brian Dollard, and I am portraying John I. Slingerland tonight, who was a congressman in the United States Congress, and he also was a New York State assemblyman, but he was primarily a farmer. And his family, John the Slingerlands, founded this hamlet of Slingerlands. He was born around 1800 or so and lived till about the time of the Civil War. He was primarily a farmer and owned a lot of farmland in this area, some of which he bequeathed to his children. And that's how this hamlet grew. My wife is with me, and her name is Lori, and she's portraying my mother tonight.
As my husband said, my name is Lori Dollard, and I am portraying Leah Slingerland this evening. I have done one other historical character, and that was at Albany Rural Cemetery. I played Emily Weed Barnes, and other than that, I really am involved because my husband is involved, and I was asked to play this role a short time ago, so I kind of came in at the end. So and Leah, of course, is mother of John, and the original person owning this property, along with her husband, also John Slingerland. So I guess I'm the great woman behind one of the great men here.
My name is Leah Slingerland. My husband John Slingerland and I have wonderful memories here. I've heard that you've come here to learn a little bit about our local history. So, without delay, especially on this particularly warm evening, I'll go. So here we go. Let's see. I was born in 1776 over New Scotland Way at my parents' farm, and maybe you've heard of them, Frederick Britt and Helena Burhans. It's over on the old road to Firabush. I believe you modern folk refer to it as Route 32. You go past a park and a pool, and as you do, you will see the old brick house and the barn still standing. It brings me such happiness to see those structures still standing. After all, my father maintained them for many decades, and it would bring him great joy as well to see them still standing. And speaking of my father, Frederick Britt, he, along with my father-in-law, also by the name of John Slingerland, were veterans of the Revolutionary War. In 1799, when John and I wed, and I came to this property, it was farmland as far as the eye could see. And on nights like tonight, when the veils are thin and I visit from beyond, I am amazed at how many homes and houses that have sprung up. Where have all the farmlands gone? My husband and I had 7 children. Our first was born a couple of years after we were wed. Her name was Magdalene. And then came John and Elizabeth, Frederick, Hester, Albert, and when I was 44 years old, our youngest, William Henry, imagine that. Well, we had our hands full here in this home and raising 7 children and carrying on all the chores for a farm. Of course, this home wasn't quite this large at that time, but we had a barn and we had a shed and we had acres of corn and wheat. And the acres that we had to pay rent on annually, that's what my husband disliked. Each year, he would have to travel to the manor house to talk with the patroon and pay with our fat fowl and wheat. That wasn't the worst part of it. The worst part was the way they talked down to my husband and his country, for his country way. In fact, they even made him provide a day's work, him and his horses, every year. In 1850, my husband died, and I continued to live here as the property went to my oldest son, John. And those years were wonderful as I could visit with my older children, and especially I enjoyed the extended visits of my son, Frederick, and my other son, William, whose property was across the way here. After a while, I started to feel quite poorly, and I developed lots of aches and pains. And in 1854, 4 years after my husband's death, my son John, he was a very good caretaker and careful record keeper, he began to purchase for me brandy, gin, and morphine so that I could live out my days in more comfort. In 1863, I finally gave up the ghost, and I died at the age of 87 years old. Now, my husband's remains were buried in the back of this property. But my son John and my other son William had an idea to build a more substantial family vault that would be located across on William's property. This caused a divide in my family amongst my children. So on February 3rd of 1851, we had a family meeting. And at that meeting, we discussed this matter at length. And again, once again, my son John, the careful record keeper, proposed the vote. 5 of my children agreed to have my husband exhumed and transferred to the new location, while 2 disagreed. And unfortunately, even till this day, that rift can be felt in our family. So consequently, my husband's remains were moved, and surprisingly, even after that bout of controversy amongst my children, they are sentimental, and they all agreed to have a new plaque designed for the vault, and that plaque read, "This tomb contains the remains of the best of fathers." Now, my body was put right into the family tomb with services performed by the Dutch Reformed minister. And my plaque reads, "God, my Redeemer, lives, and often from the skies looks down over my dust, till he shall bid me rise." Now, enough about me. I'm sure you would like to hear about my son, John. He's around here somewhere. Let me ring this bell.
Here I am, Mother.
And when he comes, do not let him go without telling you about the panther that once roamed our property.
Thank you, Mother. She certainly does tell that story about the panther all the time. You know, it even made the paper, and they had to make it about politics. Let me read it to you. This was in the Tri-Weekly Times. "A full-grown panther has made its appearance on the farm of John I. Slingerland. It is supposed to have come from the Catskill Mountains, and like the man on whose premises it encroaches, it is an anti-renter. The apparition has made great excitement, and great numbers of sportsmen are hunting the animal." This was published in 1858. By then, I was well known for my anti-rent sentiments. Now, I never claimed to be much of an orator, but when I get going, I am a passionate speaker. I talk about feudal tyranny and oppression. I speak about freedom, independence, and the blood of our forefathers spilled in defense of liberty. I also speak about how I used to have to bring the rent, the fat fowls, and the bushels of wheat to the patroon and his agent, and how the patroon's agent, well, they weren't very nice to us country folk when we brought the rent. They spoke down to us, for our country ways, as my mother spoke. And of course, they would only accept the very finest. Now, my farm, this is my own. I am my own landlord. But these feudal contracts with the patroon are unlawful. You know, the patroon and his agents, they're robbers. They're oppressors of the poor. The poor farmers, they're victims of a system of plunder, founded upon lying, fraud, intimidation, and unlawful contracts. Well, I certainly made my political enemies. I can't even read this newspaper account. Mother, would you please read this?
The anti-renters of Albany, Rensselaer, and Columbia counties held a convention on Thursday. There was a very large attendance. A determination was evinced to stand by their rights. A district anti-rent association was formed, and John I. Slingerland of Albany appointed president thereof. Hereafter, the tenants will wage their wars in courts of law. That was from the Exchange. It would have been far better for them if they had inaugurated their war in the same way. Their guerrilla warfare and repeated and inexcusable outrages on persons and property, with a liberal sprinkling of shooting, tarring, and feathering, maiming, and murdering, long ago destroyed the sympathy law-loving men might otherwise have extended to them in their cause. They have acted like fools and knaves from the start, have cost the state scores of thousands of dollars, and because they have at length got a gleam of common sense through their thick skulls, they deserve neither credit nor cooperation. But with the Honorable John I. Slingerland at their head, who once blundered into Congress by their votes, and who blundered out when his term of office expired, we have no faith that the tribes of Calico Indians will even attempt to wage war legally in the courts. Oh. Terrible.
Can you believe these character assassinations? But I can see from the grave that politics and journalism have not changed much. Now, this entire issue about land ownership was vital to the United States of America. There was much land west of the Mississippi River that was all available. Now, the Southern senators and congressmen, they wanted that property to be owned by rich plantation owners. Now, this caused a problem because that would have needed slave labor to make them profitable. They would have been such large tracts of land. Now, the Northerners, including myself and others in Congress, we believe that each man should be able to own his own piece of property, say 160 acres, to develop a large farm, and then he could live there 5 years anyway, fill out all the proper paperwork, and it would be his. Let me read to you what I wrote while I was serving in Congress. This was on June 22nd, 1848. The greater numbers of farms freely held by independent farmers, the more general will be education and industrious habit. When each man sits under his own vine and fig tree, he has motives for action and improvement. Such a state promotes healthy activity in every part of the community. The merchant and mechanic prosper, and it quickens every sphere of industry. Now, the Homestead Act passed in 1862, unfortunately, after my death. Now, you modern folk, you're familiar with this issue of slavery, yes? Now, did you know that there were slaves right here in the town of Bethlehem? I was actually raised with one who was basically part of the family, practically. Now, as I aged, grew up, this whole idea of slavery, the whole notion just really turned my stomach, and I became a strong abolitionist. And one item that comes to my mind is that of the Pearl. The Pearl was a ship that was in Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River. And on board the Pearl, there were 77 slaves who tried to escape. And as the Pearl set sail down the Potomac, they were betrayed. And they were returned to Washington, D.C. And they were going to be sent further south to be sold further and further into slavery in the Deep South. Now, this led to riots in Washington for 3 days. The pro-slavery people and the anti-slavery people, they went at it. And I was there in the thick of it. And I remember I was standing there and I was being eyed by the rioters, but I was minding my own business. But someone looked at me and they said, "Are you an abolitionist too?" And I said, "I am, and what of it? What are you going to do about it?" And I shook my cane at him, and I said, "If you want to keep your skull, you'll get out of my way." Well, one of my friends tried to pull me out of the way, but I stayed there, and I watched the proceedings. And in fact, I watched as a train was loaded several days later with those 77 slaves being sent further south, while their friends and their family wept and wailed outside, knowing they would never see their family again. This just completely turned my stomach, and I became an active letter writer on the behalf of the abolitionists. And this actually helped gain momentum to outlaw slavery in time. I became well known throughout the country because those letters were published everywhere, not just here in New York. Now, over the course of my political career, I was in Congress in 1847 to 1849, and I was also in the New York State Assembly in 1843 and in 1860, which was only just a few years before I died. You probably want to know more about my personal life. When I was only 19 years old, I married my first wife, Elizabeth Van der Zee. We have 3 children together. Unfortunately, Elizabeth only lived a few years after that, and she died in 1835. I remarried a lady named Sally Hall, and we also have 2 children together. I died when I was only 57 years old. And I wrote my last will and testament while I was feeble of health, but still strong of mind and memory. On October 22nd, actually I passed away 4 days after that on the 26th of October. I left in my will, which I think I did a pretty good job of myself, something for everyone in my family, mostly the farms. I left this farm homestead to my son John. I left to my son Harmon $300 cash. I also left a large amount of sum to my wife. I left a farmhouse also to James Dickson, 3/4 of an acre. You'll meet him later tonight. I left another farm across on Oliver Road, which I think you now call Font Grove Road, another farm to one of my other sons. I thank you for coming here tonight and hearing about my story. Thank you.
Susan Leith asked me to do it. One year the person who usually plays John I. Slingerland couldn't be a part of the program, and so I filled in for his spot. And then we were talking afterward about, they were thinking about expanding the tour, and she knows that I am the sports editor of the Times-Union, and she mentioned they were thinking about adding this baseball pitcher to the tour, and she thought I would get a kick out of that. So that's why I joined up and how I wound up being Adam Mattice.
So Adam Mattice was a baseball pitcher?
Yes.
All right.
The 1880s and the 1890s. Welcome to my porch. I am Adam Mattice. My wife Mary and I built this place shortly after we got married in 1885. I know you all are here to visit with the Slingerlands, and I am related, at least by marriage. My sister Rosalie married George Slingerland, the son of William H. Slingerland, who you will meet shortly. And my other sister, Nellie, married Cornelius Slingerland, the grandson of John I. Slingerland, who you already met. Corny had the printing company that you walked by. But what I want to talk to you about today is baseball. That's right, baseball. Good old Candy Cummings might claim that he invented the curveball, but by golly, I sure served him up when I played for Central Bridge and the Slingerland Echoes and the Altamont Stars. Nobody could hit my high and wide-breaking curveball. Those old school sluggers were so accustomed to only the swift, straight kind of pitches that they swung and missed most of the time. One game, I struck out 19 batters in a row. Man, those were the days. That was back in the 80s and the early 90s. The 1880s, mind you. Hundreds of people used to turn out and watch our team play. It seemed like every little hamlet had a team. Delmar, South Bethlehem, Bush, everybody. The national pastime was in full swing. By the end of the 1890s, we played by pretty much the same rules you play by today. But when I started out, overhand pitching wasn't legal. It wasn't in the rules until 1884. And you know, we only ever had one pitcher on the team. My arm got pretty wore out. One change I remember is when they moved the mound from 50 feet to 60 feet 6 inches from home plate. That was 1893. Major League Baseball was all the rage. We used to follow teams like the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Bridegrooms. The Bridegrooms became the Dodgers. Do you know that they play all the way out in California now? Anyway, now life wasn't all baseball and pitching. Mary and I had 3 kids together, Blanche, Dudley, and John. I worked at the D&H for more than 30 years, started out in train dispatching and shifted over to the accounting and legal department. I passed the New York bar in 1897, did some legal work for the family on the side. Oh, I was a clerk for the district school for a number of years too. Of course, me and Mary and the kids watched a lot of baseball here, especially the Village Wonders. Now that was a team. Bug Whitman, Ira Peer, Clarence Earl, those were some players. Sometimes we'd all pile on the train and maybe 200 fans or more and go watch the Wonders play. We even got to see the famous Bloomer Girls play the Cobleskill team. One newspaper said that game was a farce, but I am telling you, those girls could play. That was a real crack team. And their hurler, she was throwing smoke, I'm telling you. We always used to joke that if we got to play those girls' teams, we'd be hugging those bases. Well, that's enough baseball. You get me wound up to talk about baseball and your tour is gonna go extra innings. I'm gonna let you go and meet my brother-in-law. Have a nice evening and thank you for your attention.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Donald Hyman and today I'm going to be doing a reenactment and portrayal of James Dixon, who worked on the estate for Mr. Slingerland for many, many years. As a matter of fact, Mr. Slingerland was so proud of his work that he gave him a certain amount, 3/4 of an acre of land to live on and build his own house. And for those many years, he had many adventures and worked with a lot of different people. A lot of people know about the Slingerlands, but today I'm going to make sure you don't forget about James Dixon because he was an integral part for about 35 years of that community and working with the Slingerlands. So come on down, check me out. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all so very much for coming out this evening. I was about to leave because really, it's evening time. What time is it? Somebody tell me. Oh my goodness, my wife is gonna kill me. I should have been home about an hour ago for dinner. And she's fixing dinner for church tomorrow, and I get to sample it. Well, I'm sorry, what is my manners? My manners, my name is James Dixon, and I was born here in New Scotland, and I've lived here all 70-something years of my life. And this is my neighborhood. This is my hood, okay? All of my neighbors are really good people. We share with each other. In fact, I'm here at my neighbor's house because my wife told me to bring her some of her famous strawberry shortcake. You know the one you get where you take the biscuits and you put this, you know that one? Yeah. So I brought it to my neighbor and I was about to leave and all of you good people are here, and that would be so rude to leave, you know what I mean? But anyway, my wife Susan is the best cook in the world, I'm telling you. The only thing she does better than cook is sing. As a matter of fact, wait a minute, let me tell you this story. How did I meet my wife? Well, there was a Christmas concert and dinner over at the Methodist church. And we farmers and people that worked here on the Slingerlands estate were invited. They said, yeah, come on. We're going to have some turkey and chicken and ham and more. And I was like, you don't have to tell me twice. I'm going, right? And I went for the dinner and I was making myself a plate. And next thing I know, I hear this voice of an angel. Woo-wee! And I said, who is that? Singing Angels We Have Heard on High. And I went out there and I saw the most beautiful goyle I ever saw in my life. And guess what? Cupid shot his arrow. And I was in love. And when I say I'm in love, you best believe I'm in love. L-U-V. Well, I started courting and courting. And guess what? Things started sparking before I know she was in love with me. And what's your name, little lady? Can you spell? No, let's all spell together. And guess what happened? Everybody repeat after me. E-L-O-P-E-D. That's right. We tied the knot. We eloped it. And her father, George, who had a farm not too far from here, found out about he wasn't too happy that I married his little daughter. But when my first son was born, guess what we did? We named him George. And that took care of all of that, okay? So, I worked here for so many years, and in that time period, I worked with some good men, really good men here on this dairy farm. Do you know how much hay and rye it takes to feed horses and cows? In one day? A week? A month? You know what? I know where the expression hay is for horses comes from now. Yeah, okay. Well, let me see. Some of the guys I worked with there was Mike the Irishman. Let me see. Martin the Dutchman stayed in my house and paid me rent for the 7 months he stayed and worked here. And oh yeah, Sam Pitt. Sam was a character. He was something else. Oh, there was nothing Sam wouldn't do. Well, let me tell you about Sam Pitt. Every year in Albany, they had these traveling minstrel shows that would come through with singing and dancing and comedians and clowns, and I would save up my little money, and because there's not too much entertainment around here, so I'd go to town, and I went on a Thursday and come back and open my big mouth and told Sam about it. Well, Sam was not to be outdone. He borrowed money on his wages to get me and him a ticket for us to go downtown to see that show that Friday night. Sam, he had him a good time. Well, like I say, ain't too much to do on the farm and I love it, but every now and then I like to travel. When I got that steam ferry boat on the Hudson down to New York City, woo-wee! Now I heard him say, how you gonna keep them down on the farm after they seen Paris? Guess what? It was not Paris, it was New York City. Well, I never seen so many people in my life, and they just going and going and going, and they're from Germany, and they're from Italy, and they're from Ireland, and they're from Africa, and they're from China, everywhere, and they just, and I'm standing there just looking at it, just, and the building's just so tall. Ain't nothing in this area that tall. Well, got some money together, saved up, went down there to see the fireworks from the 4th of July. Don't you know it? Got on that omnibus, rode around 5 Points, saw a place I thought I might be able to get some grub. A couple of fellas came up to me and said, yeah, come on inside. Robbed me. Took my boots. I came back here with the stuff on my back. I had to borrow some money from Mr. Slingerland. The Slingerlands have been good to me since I've been here. You know something? I ended up becoming the general manager for this whole estate, this dairy operation. And in 1861, I got a call after Mr. John I passed away. And they called me and they said, James, have a seat, we need to talk to you. And I thought I was about to get let go. And I said, what am I going to do? Susan's going to kill me. Well, they sat down and said, we got something to tell you, James, and we need you to listen. I said, okay. I, John I. Slingerland, give and devise and bequeath to the colored man, James Dixon, and his heirs, my Susan and our Georgie, and assigns forever all that certain lots and house that's situated in the town of Bethlehem, county of Albany. Well, I ended up getting 3/4 of an acre of land right down here on Bond Road. The house is right there. And guess what? I call it God's little acre. Because I got my wife, and I got my son, and I got my horses and cows, and I'm managing this estate, and it's nothing to complain about. I love it here. I love my neighbors. Well, I'm a patriot. In 1863, Civil War came about, and they was drafting colored men. And I signed up, but they didn't call me. Guess I wasn't young enough. Old enough. Whatever. Anyway, 2 of my friends, Peter and Sam, they went, but they came back and told me some stories. I told them, well, one reason I wanted to go because I know they was going to be training down in New York City. But that didn't happen to me. But you know, this place is something else. We get 4 seasons. And winter can be something else around here. I'm almost 70-something years old. A few years back in 1902, we had one of the biggest snowstorms you ever seen in your life. I don't mean snow here or there. I mean here, okay? Nobody could go nowhere. Nobody could do something. So I said, James, you need to do something about that. So I went and got that snowplow. And I plowed a road down here. So a path was made so my neighbors could get out and get back and forth to the market. And guess what? Y'all ever hear the expression, loose lips sink ships? Well, in this town, you got lips that would sink a battleship. Next day in the Altamont Enterprise, big article. We wish to thank James Dixon for clearing a path for his neighbors. Who told? Anyway, I'm loving here. This is my home. These are my neighbors. I got my family. Thank you, God. Thank you. And thank you. God bless you.
She contacted me and Susan and wanted to talk to me about getting some actors to portray James Dixon. So, and then I'm Jean-Remy Monet. I'm the founder, the artistic director of the Black Theater Troupe of upstate New York. So she knows that I can find actors, so she called me, and then I met with her, and then that's how I'm here. And then I called Daniel, asked Daniel if he would be interested to be James Dixon, and I knew he would be the perfect person for this part. He's very alive and and funny and to tell the story, his story. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to support him and Suzanne and the great things going on around here.
My name is Peter Krause, and I play William Henry Slingerlands here at the Burial Vault. This is the 3rd time that we've done this over the last year and a half. I was actually asked to do it because of my work at the Albany Rural Cemetery, portraying folks who passed away in that particular location. And so I was thrilled to have the opportunity to do this. It was also a great experience to learn about the Slingerlands and the history involved with this particular burial vault. I, like so many people, had no idea that it even existed. And the folks here in the village have really, in the town, have made a great effort to see this restored because it does have historical significance. And as you can see, when you can see it, it's a great project, and we're hoping that it will be completed maybe by the end of this calendar year. And these tours are conducted to give people an opportunity to learn a little bit about the history of Slingerlands and the burial vault in particular. So I'm pleased to be part of the team that portrays the members of the Slingerland families and some of the community members as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is William Henry Slingerland. I see that you've been visiting with my older brother John and my mother earlier in the evening, and some members of our community. So I hope you've had an enjoyable time. Well, the final stop on your journey tonight tonight is also the final stop on my journey, as this is my eternal resting place. As you can see, there's been some construction done here, some renovations, to try to restore it to what it once was when I first viewed it, living in this wonderful house that used to stand here. It was my home. Unfortunately, after almost standing 100 years, the house was torn down in 1982. It had not been well maintained, it had become dilapidated, and unfortunately, it had to be taken down. What a shame. Well, I am the baby of the family. I was born on November 13th, 1820. I attended the local schools, the Albany Academy, and I trained under Andrew Tennant to become an engineer and a surveyor. My most memorable project was dealing with the newly constructed New York State Capitol, specifically the Assembly Chamber, which had a wonderful sandstone ceiling. It was vaulted and groined, painted borders, beautiful gold highlights. It was spectacular. Unfortunately, no sooner had it been completed than it started to crack. And when a very large section, about the size of a bowling ball, came crashing down into the floor, I was employed to come and assess the architectural integrity of that ceiling. Well, I can tell you, in all of my reports, I clamored for its replacement. It was unsafe. And in 1888, it was replaced by the wooden oak structure that you see there today, which is absolutely beautiful. So, let me tell you a little bit about some of the things that I was involved in and my brothers were involved in during that period of time. One was working as surveyors for the Albany-Susquehanna Railroad. In fact, my brothers John and Albert were influential, along with me, in establishing the rail line from Albany down to Cobleskill. It was quite an amazing activity. Albert, when he wasn't busy surveying, was busy buying and selling land in this area, and actually built all the homes up on Kenwood Avenue that were occupied by the railroad executives. He was a very busy man. As for me, I became the first postmaster in this area in 1852. At that time it was known as Normanskill. And I served from 1852 to 1873 when it became known as Slingerlands. Of course, it had been known as Slingerland's Corners for years because most of the population here were Slingerlands. It did not sit well with all of the folks in the area though, and in 1890 a group of individuals attempted to have this place renamed Ruxton, which is a village in England. My family got wind of it and of course made short work of that effort, and it continued to be known as Slingerlands as it is today. One interesting caveat to that is that long after I left my post as postmaster, some thieves broke into the post office in the middle of the night, dynamited the safe, and made off with $300 worth of postage and blank money orders. Curiously enough, no one heard the explosion, and the thieves were never apprehended. Strange things can happen in a rural community. Well, in addition to that, my last major project was the Suburban Water Company. We brought cool, clean, fresh water from springs in the Helderbergs all the way down here into the village. My son George and my granddaughter Grace were involved with me at that as well. And when we sold the business to the village, we were then serving locations such as Del Mar and Ellesmere as well. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was married to Elizabeth Wayne in 1842. We had 5 wonderful children: John, George, William, Helene, Elizabeth. Unfortunately, my wife Elizabeth died in 1868, and a year later I remarried Maria Whitbeck. My youngest son was 7 years old at the time, and we were happily for a number of years. Well, it is an intriguing adventure to be part of this entire episode. And one of the things that my brother John and I were heavily involved in were Republican politics. John, of course, is the consummate politician, and I'm sure he told you that during his presentation tonight. I, on the other hand, much less so. But I was elected to the state legislature in 1880, and even though I was encouraged to serve, beyond that time, the political life was not for me. I wanted to return to things I enjoyed, such as engineering and surveying, and so I did so. But one other activity that I was involved in, and that was the breeding of cream pots, a farming activity. Does anyone know what a cream pot is? Any guesses? Well, a cream pot is a superior milking cow, and I was very successful in that endeavor. In fact, upon my death, one of my in-laws, Charles Whitbeck, inherited all of my cream pots. Be that as it may. After living a very long and productive life, I passed from this world in May 13th of 1910. My estate at that time was worth $150,000, which included the home that you can't see. However, the burial vault was deeded to the town of Bethlehem, along with the right-of-way that you followed tonight to arrive at this location. In the burial vault, you would find me, my wife Elizabeth, 3 of my children, including John, who, by the way, was a Civil War veteran. I myself served in the New York militia for 10 years. And the youngest member of the family, a grandson, Charles Arthur, who was only 2 years old upon his death. So, as you can see, it is being reconstructed, and I want to thank all of you for supporting that activity. And I hope you've had an enjoyable evening learning a little bit more about the Slingerlands and the final stop at the burial vault. So thank you for your attention.
My name is Allison Armour-Garb, and this is my husband.
I'm Brad Armour-Garb.
And we've lived just down the road from here since, for 18 years. No, 17 years. And we've actually never been back here to see the burial vault. So we kind of had heard that our neighbors were trying to get it restored, but we were so excited when we heard about this event. And the way we heard about it was a strange coincidence. So last winter, I was at the Center for Disability Services telethon with an a cappella group of high school students, local high school students that I coach. And a gentleman gave me his business card afterwards, and he said, I would love to work with your group. I do some local television, we would love to get them on TV. And then I didn't hear from him for a while. But then he called me the other day and he said, I'm working on a story. We want to use your group's music as the background music. And I said, okay, sure. And we worked together to get him the recording and the video and the everything. And he said that he was going to be doing this event. He's the actor who's portraying James Dickson. And I said I didn't even know that event was happening. I'm definitely going to get tickets. And so we went right online and got the tickets, and we're so happy that we came. And he did an amazing job. He's a great actor.
I found this really interesting. We knew a little bit about the area, but not much, and now I feel like we have a much better understanding of the area. And also, we never got to see this Slingerlands cemetery before, which is interesting and cool. Thank you.